Well, hello everyone. Once again, it's me, Nathan Filati, with the latest Ag Uncensored podcast. I got a little behind last week on getting one out. Main reason, and it's kind of what I'm going to talk about today, is there was a local large farm show, Big Iron, and a lot of equipment and all that stuff. So that was just 3 days of busy talking to people and all that. But actually, one of those days, there was a conference at the Grand Farm, which I've talked about, which is nearby me, called was it Automation Nation, Automate Nation? I I should know exactly what it's called, but anyways, about automation in agriculture, robots and all that fun stuff and processes. So I thought, I could talk about that a little more and kind of go through some of the conversations I had, what I saw, and dive into that. Before I get into that, I'm going to say this right now. In this specific format of me just doing my thing for 30 minutes, I'm probably changing that up a little bit. There'll be more out on that. I'm hoping next week. It's not that me doing something like this or me kind of doing my fun quips and talks is by myself won't continue to some degree, but I will be changing that a little bit and adding some kind of a newer version of this podcast. And the plan is to bring in some other people. And I'm going to expand upon that more. I won't get all that this week. I just wanted to note a little bit that this whole kind of thing is going to change a little bit for the better. It's kind of off of requests of what some people like is more of my one-on-one, and then some of what I used to do more, which I would have conversations with others and kind of deep dive into some things. Of course, I'm going to do it in a little different way. But anyways, that's that. So let's get into the robotics and the automation side of ag and where that is. And I'll first say that if you've listened to any of my past things, I've always been a little skeptical of some of it. Definitely go back a few years. I was maybe even borderline negative towards it. Not in a sense didn't think that people were good or building stupid things. It was that a lot of people were missing some of the nuanced issues that exist, not necessarily even technical, but kind of the emotional side of farming and what bringing in something that automates your job that you love and are passionate about, what that does to kind of the agriculture psyche and even the rural psyche, and then all the other kind of logistical challenges, which there's all these still exist. Don't get me wrong. They do. And they're not going to go away anytime soon, though I can start seeing a little bit of a shift taking place. I'm not sure why exactly. I think part of it is some are just finding methods that have been around for clearly a long time. People are just getting tired of them. I see more farmers being open to the idea of doing things a little differently. There's the core mindset. We're all most farmers are raising commodity crops and prices are not great. The outlook of the economics of agriculture don't look great in the broad sense. These happen. Some will say, well, these are the cycles that happen in ag. And sure, there is some nature to that. Of course, this time around, it seems a little man-made. I think it's hard to ignore that. There are a lot of our trade partners that are not happy and feel, their trust has been violated in us. I get it. And there's 1,000 conversations in between there, which I'm not going to get into, but it's a problem. But that's to the point where I'm getting is why I think there's a little more openness. from it being either maybe some of the immigration things and that whole stuff going on, there people are like, well, maybe I need to look into this more, some version of it, to automate some things and look at some robotic processes at least. There's others that are seeing it as an opportunity to get away from, more chemicals, if this can go up and down the row and just, mow the weeds down or kind of do a simple, specific hoeing of them, I could save a lot of money and time, and I could concentrate on other things. There's that. And naturally, the tech is just getting a little better. It's progressing. It's not perfect. Clearly, there's been groups that have had trouble on it. Maybe they, I don't know, raised too much money, or it's went too fast, or they were going after a certain niche and it didn't quite work that way, or there's all slew of things. There's even some weird legal battles out there with lasers, which I've talked about before, which to me is like the dumbest thing ever. Yeah, it's just such a weird process and stance on that. Nothing really new, people with money want to protect their money. And when some other IP comes in that gets against that, people want to fight it. What do you do? You fight, and then the whole legal process turns into another thing. Anyways, I've literally talked about that in another episode from the past. So go ahead and look at that if you want. Now, what I'm seeing though, like I said, I'm getting a little different perspective of it. Not that I wasn't, for progress or wanting to see some of these things work. Like I said, my fear was more, where's this really going? How this will really change things? And then, I think there's been a new boost of maybe acceptance around some of the AI and everything stuff. Of course, you combine that with robots, and there's been movies about that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to link actually something to you I think y'all need to watch. And I actually recorded a previous version of this where I talked about it, but I got way too deep with it and it was not really ag related. Then I tried it and it didn't quite get there, but you merge the two and things get weird in the mental mindset of how this works in agriculture. And I'll get to that, but let's start off with the positives. Okay, so I go to Big Iron, the local farm show, and there's clearly other farm shows, but it's all like the same big equipment. Everyone's trying to sell this big stuff, and they're just going to the regional shows and doing their thing. Then there's this, hey, here's how tech can evolve with equipment and manufacturing. So at the event at the Grand Farm, which is growing and, it's getting more recognized. There's a lot of people there. It was sold out. There's people from all over the country, different parts from other countries. Yeah, it's growing. It's cool to see, especially when it's literally like 5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So I'm very fortunate on that. And yeah, it just brings in a lot of people. So I don't have to go travel and I can go home. My wife doesn't get mad because I'm traveling everywhere. So keep that going. Let's have all the farm shows there for all I care. There's some cool stuff there, stuff that's still in, it's development phases, R&D. Most of it really is still in pretty much R&D phases, not full production, because these things are expensive to build. They're complicated. There was the Pika group had their basically their drone spray plane out there, and it's big. I mean, what is it? I don't know, 40 feet wide, and I mean it kind of looks like one of the similar size of like a Predator drone of sorts. I mean, it's clearly using some of the same technology, really. And those things have clearly done stuff for years. So, and it flew, and it was a windy day too. So the previous day, on the Wednesday of last week, they flew it. And it was really calm. So I think there was a lot of people out there seeing that. But then they flew it on Thursday. It was a little windy, a little breezy. That's how North Dakota is. It's flat and breezy. I live literally in one of the breeziest places in the state, which also means one of the breeziest places in like the upper Great Plains, if not the country. So that's a common thing. it handled itself very well. Went down. It kind of was about, I think, 20 feet off the ground, sprayed some water, did its loop, came back, did a couple times. Everyone's oohing and awing with their phones out and talking about it. And while I've known it's existed for a while, and I've seen a few videos, just seeing it in person, it's like, oh well, I guess yeah, this could kind of work. I've had some suspicion along, landing. I mean, can it land on a gravel road, or does it need a runway? Stuff like that. They landed it right on the gravel road. Of course, there's always going to be some dangerous issues at play. I'll say there was a little mix up from the local airport. They got it all cleared, but one of the guys, I think was retired manager of the airport, he didn't know about it, so he got a little pissy and thought, blah blah blah. And yeah, that could anything in that realm, flying anything drone, especially with a payload of chemical that it'll have, and it's big. It could, I think, can easily take down anything that's flying in the air. Run into an airliner. I mean, it's oof, stuff like that. So yeah, that's a whole nother set of questions that is harder, and with aerial applicators too. There's fear around that, and I get that, but there's safety measures, beacons, there's all that stuff. So it seemed, talking to the people around it, they were, they see those challenges, and they're trying to be very open and vocal about testing it and where they are and telling everybody. So it's just going to take time. That's not going to be an overnight thing everywhere. So hence why they raise a ton of money, and I'm sure they'll grab more. But that is something, just seeing in person, doing the loops, is like, oh, that could work. And at 500 a pop, if it can kind of do itself, maybe you need a local kind of maintenance group to handle stuff. Maybe the current aerial applicator people, maybe they'll buy one. They'll buy 10 of them. I don't know. Maybe a farmer will buy one. I think that's a future logical thing. So I don't know. It's cool to see. I was a little skeptical on parts on it, and after seeing it there, it's like, oh, all right, this could be real. This could be something that can scale, that can actually work, that can help, and all that fun stuff. Now, in saying that, it is a drone that can spray something automatically, and as I was just briefly saying, you add AI and all that stuff to it. Probably could spray some other stuff that's, not good for people. It honestly, if you really think about it, it can fly long distances. It could spray stuff, something like that. It's probably hard to detect because you can fly low on the radar and all this stuff. It's something that could cause a lot of chaos too. If you really want to put your brain in there, I'm going to try not to, but I think everyone's thinking it. That's the other side of this, but I'm going to get there. Just hold on. I'm going to get to the whole world ending thing of AI and robots. Just hold on. For now, I'm saying, Domo Arigoto, Mr. Roboto, which I usually don't say. So there's the spray part. I'm optimistic. Let's say that. So hopefully can see more, and I will, because I'm right here, and they'll do more testing and all that fun stuff. So yeah, we'll go from there. Now, some of the other robotic stuff is really, it's in the air, it's on the ground. So one of the groups out there was Greenfield Robotics. I've seen their stuff all over. They've done a lot of advertising. I see them on Facebook all the time. They've also done something really interesting, which I love, and I've always wanted to kind of ask them about it, and I finally did, was they've done equity crowdfunding in ag. There's a few that have kind of done it. They've done 2 rounds of it, which I think is great, because having, people in ag being able to actually buy it instead of just, there's large institutional investors or large angels. That, I think that's great. I grew up in an entrepreneur family, and, our product, we owned it, still do 100%. And having that piece is good. Of course, I've always thought if I ever really dabbled into it, yeah, I'd like a bunch of people to own it, like little bits and pieces. I think the equity crowdfunding is actually, to me personally, I think it is the way to get more acceptance from farmers with anything in ag tech, be it robotics, be it software, be it other types of hardware, whatever. Algorithmic processes to help them. I think it should be easier for them to own parts of these companies without being kind of that institutional investor where they need X, Y, Z, which most of them could do it. It's just, it's hard to do. I like the way they're going about it. So that's first part. So talked about that. It's still hard to do. It's still complicated. There's still legal fees and all that crap. I've always been skeptical of the row bots, the ones that go down the row back and forth for many different reasons, mainly not because they can't necessarily do the job. Some it's going to be harder in certain areas. My area in Red River Valley, it's very clay heavy soil. So, a little pickaxe hoe for cultivation it's hard. It's just hard to do. It's especially after, if things dried up and it rained. And there's other places like that. Then, they don't fit everywhere. Just like not all equipment fits great everywhere either, even going back in time. So they got to find their niches. And I think that's been hard for them for the most part is finding those niches. I get it for specialty crops. Like I've always been more positive on row type bots for specialties, because of, the cost of these things. They're not cheap. They'll get cheaper, clearly. But they're specialized products. They take specialized people doing it. Of course, that can get automated more and more, and that's good. That's the progression. That's where everything should go. Of course, when I've thought of the majority commodity crops, your corn and soybeans and stuff like that. Of course, my area's got sugar beets, and then there's edible beans and potatoes, and those are in rows. And I've they're big farms. People have a lot to cover that do some of those things. Having a bunch of robots on the farm or renting them through a service, it's like, God, they just take a lot. I mean, that's where they probably put in their investment decks, the total addressable market. It's like, oh geez, every farmer needs 20 of these things. Well, at 50 grand a pop or 25 grand a pop, whatever they come to be. Holy crap. And then the service and the support and the parts and all this stuff. Oh, it's massive. Of course, if it ever got to the point where it could be that, one of the OEMs are going to buy it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Because that's really their goal. That's probably the goal of every single robotics group right now, is to get it to a point where it sort of makes sense in a production level. And then the OEM will see it and be like, well, yeah, this is, may not be 10 years out still, but at least got it to that point where there's acceptance to a degree, and it pretty much works on its own good enough 90% of the time. And there's a model and all that. They're all hoping on that. There's various versions that are going to have tougher times on that than others. It's all over the board. But anyways, I've always still been skeptical of them just because of the maneuvering and in a field, and there's wet spots, there's obstacles, there's deer antlers that'll sit in the middle of the field after deer died of overeating. Happens here all the time, honestly, especially in bad winters. There's just stuff like that. And you put a lot of more machines in a field, it just causes more logistical challenges, like I've talked about. Though talking to the guys there and then just seeing it, like, oh, well, I mean, it's pretty ruggedized. It's got some cool features. There's some other things I think it's maybe better suited at. Now, like the mowing up and down the row, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, how often can it do it? And they were saying, up to 14 acres a day per robot. So it's like, okay, well, for a quarter section, you need 10, 11 of them, half that for an 80-acre field, and which is common. It's like, okay, and if that can just, reduce, say, some chemical dependency, so you don't have to buy all those chemicals, and then you don't have to bring the machine down. It's like, okay, there's some economics here. Of course, just mowing down weeds is only half the problem. There's also weeds in the middle, of course, the shading effect. There's all these other things that play into it. Depends on the crop, really. So while it's not going to work for everything, there's other things that could be done with them. From a minor tillage thing to maybe some very spot chemical application stuff. They just seem more. What I'm seeing is they're just more put together than just these kind of, call it, college class projects that a lot of them seem like. I see them all over. I've seen them since, oh gosh, 2005, where some PhD students at an engineering campus created this robot, and clearly they're driving around and they're showcasing that. So it's been going on for 20 years actually. Ag robotics has, for at least the in row stuff and in field stuff. Milking, go back even further. There's other robotic processes in ag, trust me. And there's varying versions of it, so it's not like it's not being used. It's not like this automation is not being done. It's just we're slowly getting to more minute use cases, which of course that's going to happen. And I'll say in the field stuff, I've been just more skeptical because it's like the economics and the mindset, and then the logistics, and then field challenges, and all these other things that kind of mix into the pot, saying, well, I mean, I get it, but gosh, there's a lot of barriers to cover there. Of course, the best things that come out of things are when you solve big barriers. So there's not as many as there used to be. There maybe can't be, because the OEMs, which will buy these things, there's only so many that they can buy and then turn into a larger thing. So yeah, all that's going to get consolidated in weird ways. So we'll see what happens. Like I say, I'm a little more optimistic on them as I was before. Still lots of challenges, but there's some other things I think they could do that are a little more translatable to a master market. So for instance, and which I talked to those guys about, is soil testing. There's been all sorts of different ways to soil test, and I guess for tissue test, you could throw that in there too. Especially when you're going through tall crops or just hot and just muggy and all this crap. The bugs here, for instance, mosquitoes, are just awful, terrible. They have been all summer. It's like, yeah, if you can skip doing that, that's great. Of course, there's challenges with, say, soil testing, is getting the soil out of the probe. It can be sticky. There's some that can do automated, kind of pick it out, move it away. Here, soil gets really sticky. Other areas, sandier soil, it's a lot easier. Depends on kind of your loam, I suppose, in the soil. So I think there's an opportunity there, but actually picking up soil, storing it, testing it, I don't think that's where it's at. It's more of probably placing the probes automatically more often, the ones that are more just like a sensor probe. My friend Dan Rooney at Landscan, he's got one. There's a few others that are building ones. You merge the two together. By the way, I'm going to connect you guys if you're listening. You merge the two together, I think there's some hope there. And I think that could dive into a little more practical scaling of some of these things. Getting something that's a little more digestible. Maybe it's mowing this row at the same time and then also doing the probe once in a while, or this sensor thing. I mean, I think that's not like a new concept. Others have thought about these things as, it should have more than one function. Phenotyping, taking pictures, spot spraying thing. You can only add so much to these things too. They can get expensive and complicated. But yes, I just see that as there's some growing opportunities there. And for me, if I put the farmer cap on, I would like one. I would take one, at least to start, in kind of a soil testing, maybe crop testing capacity. Now, could it fit exactly where I'm hoping to farm and what my situation would be? It's like maybe a little narrow row or something that can transverse over rows, because the crop could be a little shorter instead of like going through tall corn. Maybe I got to find that one. There's ones that do that. But yeah, thinking of it more in that way for myself. And heck, maybe there's a little drone on top of it and it charges up, flies around, does some other like side. That's the type of thing that kind of excites me. It's not necessarily the application going through every single row. Groups will try to do that. It's going to depend on field size and scale of operations. I think that's where they're going to have a little more trouble compared to, larger, just, a larger cultivator bar and a tractor. You're just logistical barriers. So I think of it as, can it do things going every 12 rows? That's a little more accessible. And so you don't need 20 of them. You need one of them, maybe two, or maybe you have one in just each field that you operate in. So in my case, call it five fields. It's like, one in every single one that does, some, testing in the zones and areas that I want, or it actually kind of figures it out itself. That would be cool based on the changing conditions, everything. Maybe there's a drone attached to it. So it's also going up, flying that exact area, but then it's also going to like other areas. Maybe it's tethered. And that drone can go do like some other like precise little testing or pictures really up close to the plant. Well, this is kind of this mothership holding them together. I could see that. Or maybe, I almost could see like for drone spraying, that's getting more popular. Of course, doing broad spectrum spraying on it, I think it's doable. It's logistical problems. Some of them don't, windy conditions, spray patterns. There's all sorts of crap there. But maybe you have like this base. You have one bigger drone, robot that can straddle, let's say, so many rows, or you have five of them and they're all in five different areas and they all have their own specific drone, and they kind of just slowly cover everything, but they only have to cover 10% of the space, physically, where it can tether and fly over other areas and do all these other tests inside things and come back. And so it's like, well, here's what's going on. And then maybe with things like, some of the automation stuff, things of See and Spray Tech, you can come in with a larger piece of equipment there and then spot specific stuff. I think that's probably what makes more sense long term, and how that can fit together, especially with like larger commodity based crops, is it's maybe more of a sensing tool. Application tool on large scale is still troubling a little bit. Of course, with that Pica drone or things of that size, maybe you can get a little better on that. Of course, there's crazy costs with all this. I can buy a sprayer with a 120-foot boom for $15,000 too, instead of $500,000. Could I put a See and Spray thing on it for, I don't know, $100,000, like Weed It, I think, is something like that. And that'll get better, and all these other add-ons. Sure. So many different options, possibilities. Everyone's situation is going to be different. So once again, like I said, I'm optimistic. Now, I've got into all the ag stuff and I'm getting close to where I usually shut things off. But because this is kind of my last, well, maybe not last exactly, but last kind of general format of this, I will go a little longer. So stay with me here. All this is great. I'm a little more optimistic, a little more positive on robotics and automation. Never really been against it. It's just there's all these other factors, and it feels a little better now. The atmosphere, even talking to some farmers, like, yeah, I can see that. Where before it was like, no, get it out of here. So it's just natural progression, which is good. Of course, now you get to the other end of the spectrum. Okay, they still, there's labor issues in ag, so you're going to fill that gap. AI is getting better. It's not to the point, some will claim like, oh, it can just automatically create software and we don't need programmers anymore. It's not there yet. Seeing how things are progressing, you add enough of these things together, it gets really weird really fast. And what you need to do, and maybe you watch this before this next part because it'll give you some reference, is I I watched this podcast episode, a full one, which I don't actually watch a lot of full ones. It's more like clips because it's just time and life and all that. But it was a Diary of a CEO, and there was a guy on there being interviewed. His name was Roman Yamalinsky. I think that's what it was. You'll be able to find it. It's fairly recent if you go on the channel. He's a kind of AI expert. It's been in it forever. Worked with various groups, but he's been on more of the safety concern. And his basically consensus was we are not putting the safety protocols on AI and some of these things. So while robotics kind of sits over here as like the physical form, I'll get there. We all know where that can go in our heads, at least. The AI itself, that gets a little interesting. Now we think, oh, you can just, let's pull the plug, But to his point, it's like, yeah, we might, maybe in the US or in Europe or whatever, but will another country do it? And everyone's progressing on it. But, it's really, it's the US and China right now. Will they pull the plug? And he was saying, like, we're not even adding, we're not putting in the safety measures that we've talked about for a long time because of the progression of being the one that does it all, being the major factor of running AI and this battle of who's kind of superior. And I don't have to say names of who, but we all know what they are. And he's saying he's worried. But he also says, like, I don't know if it matters. Really, what the safety protocols are just delaying the inevitable, which is AI singularity, when it can think further than we can. And he said, there's all these inventions that we've created that, displace jobs and make, our lives easier, but also kind of harder at first. The most recent big one was the internet. And a lot of people compare the two, but you really can't, because the internet can't also create itself. That's the difference with AI. We've created intelligence, or we are getting to creating an intelligence. And to some degree, we've created an intelligence that goes well beyond what a human can do. Clearly. It's one thing to beat a human at chess. It's another to beat all of the mathematicians in the world. Well, it just will get better, because now it's figuring out math in ways that we don't think, because it's doing it. So it can create a better version of itself slowly, just like humans. We evolve and create better versions of ourselves. And so the safety protocols are more just to delay that, so that maybe it will form into something that is more helpful for us. But we're also, to his point, saying we're teaching it to not have these things and to kind of be rogue, just like humans are being kind of rogue, and we are dangerous animals creating war and all this. It's like, unless we like culturally change and all come together with putting these protocols in and kind of guiding it, right, it's inevitable. We'll just replace like almost everything. And so you might think, it was like, wow, I'm a human. I can lift my phone. I can shovel. I can do that. I'm a plumber. I can do the plumbing myself. Those jobs are safe, or the medical side of doing like surgery and stuff. It's like, well, but not really. Seriously. Even the physical jobs, it clearly would be able to do that if it had a physical form, i.e. robotics. Well, we don't have that yet. But yet there are groups, like Boston Dynamics, I think, or Boston Robotics. They have these humanoid things, and they're jumping around doing all sorts of crazy crap. When we get to the point that we've actually created a humanoid robot that can be just as physical as us and do all the same things, fingers, legs, toes, running, jumping, it'll do it faster and better and stronger and more endurance. When we merge that with an AI, some AI kind of super intelligence, when you merge them, then we are kind of done. because it will be able to do everything. Now, it won't necessarily kill us or take us out, but it will be able to do all the things that we do. Really, it will be able to drive the tractor. It will be able to build the tractor. It'll be able to mine the materials that create the iron and the electronics to build the tractor. And it'll be able to do that all the time. And if you think, well, it needs power and we're going to provide it power, we could shut off the power. It's like, well, it could create its own power plant. With its mind intelligence, it could probably find ways of creating energy that either we've suppressed because of economics and power and all that stuff, oil and gas. It could create power in realms that we won't allow ourselves to create, or that we've held back, or that we can't, because we just couldn't get there collectively as a mind to build these things. And it'll just ramp up, and we'll just be a bunch of bored humans on this planet. It might grow food for us, it might do this, but we won't be able to match it ever again, because it'll constantly just get so much better. So this is where he's like, there's these breaking points. So AI itself is one thing, but in a computer, like we're talking here and that, and of course it's another thing though, to bring that to the physicality. Of course, you can already see it being used to manipulate. It does do it. There's people that basically killed themselves because of it. We're getting deep here. I'm trying to get around to agriculture, but it can manipulate propaganda. We do it ourselves, so it's just copying what we're doing and doing it more intricately. It could, or it probably is. And if you think, well, it's not smarter than humans, like, well, honestly, it is smarter than like most humans. Really. If you look at the whole world landscape, it is. It just is. Now, can I understand love and compassion and has a soul and all that fun stuff? No, but then again, what's our version of that? And where he gets into it, which I find just super interesting, and I've watched some other stuff on this, it's kind of changing my worldview of a lot of this stuff. So maybe that's why I'm changing my format of all that. He says, like, he thinks we're basically in a simulation now. And there's scientists and physicists. There's famous ones from Schrodinger, like Schrodinger's cat, and Planck, I can't think of his first name. People that created basically the theories around quantum mechanics. And there's like mathematical, scientific theories out there that we are in a simulation. It proves it. Now, your version of simulation is the Matrix, because we've seen pop culture. And sure, but really, okay, I'm putting this video out as we speak, here shortly. AI could basically take all the other videos I've done, replicate it, my style, my look, all this stuff, and recreate it. It can do that now. And most people can't tell the difference. After all of the events last week, I've already seen things on Facebook and the reels, the short form videos and all that stuff, all on social media. There's videos of people that are not alive, that were political figures, talking about events of last week, saying XYZ, and call it can be on whatever side you want. It doesn't really matter. It's there. It's like, are we creating that, or something else, or is it self-created that? I don't really know. I'm sure mostly it's people because they want to have some narrative to push. But it already can change our sense of reality. So as it progresses, what's saying that we're already not in one because it got to a point and we're in a test bed of a simulation for itself to learn how we are, and then there's another one somewhere else, and that's the kind of the multiverse of things. And you get deep into there, it's like, well, maybe that's just how reality works. Not in like, you can't think of a computer. You have to think of like the atom itself, like in particles, where it can simulate it because it's basically light. That's what a lot of things are made up of, that we're trying to find out. You can kind of create it. Like a photon does not have mass. So it's not like matter that we touch. We just see it. Well, that's kind of the point, is we're just seeing these things. And if you compress it enough, it can become into matter. That's like the large escaping theory, which maybe there's something off in there. All you physicists that watch and quantum mechanic, professionals, by all means, eat me alive. I'm sure there's none of you on here listening. Go look it up yourself on kind of the simulation theory using quantum mechanics, and tie it all together and add in search AI to search where the commonalities are. Of course, he gets into then is that what you get into religion and spirituality that can be all connected in there. That gets deep. I'm not gonna get there. So take what I said before: robotics, AI, automation, good things, getting better, more acceptance. Then take the craziness of where it can go, and then see what happens in agriculture and what can be done. Where is that breaking point? Because we are evolving to create the robotics to do the things we do. It's not to the humanoid part quite yet, but we're not that far off. Probably within the next 10 years, where a robot will be affordable enough, a humanoid robot will be affordable enough. There's ones, I think, in China that you can get for like 25 grand now. They can walk through a field, pick up a plant, and just throw it, just like a human can do out there with a hoe, and grab them with their hand. And you scale these things, and they'll just get better versions. Look at the movie I, Robot. It's weird. We are getting there. It is probably very close, where I could almost see the manufacturers, the OEMs, revert to simpler machines that don't have all the electronics in them as much, the automation things, because they'll be like, here's the John Deere Case IH AGCO farm robot, the humanoid farm robot, and it sits in the cabin. All its sensors are seeing everything. It doesn't need to be in the machine, so they can make machines cheaper, smaller, but you're putting money into the humanoid robot that they're selling out there. It's like, well, it can also do this. It can drive the truck. It can do this, and it can do it during the night. Oh, and when it goes picks weeds itself or its clan, the 5 you bought, instead of the 5, Visa employees that you hired, which is insanely common right now. Up here, there's a lot of South Africans that come in and help farmers and all that. Well, you just get 5 of those. And if you can buy them for cheaper than what you pay one for these each year, well, and they can work like all the time, and they don't potentially cause trouble. They don't have health care. They just need power and a little bit of maintenance, which they could then maintain themselves if you just had the parts, because parts are being created by some robot too. They just add it all up, add all these things up, and it's like, well, then if it gets to a point, well, we wouldn't, if it doesn't want us around, well, we just stop making food. And if we weren't in the position to make it for ourselves anymore because we forgot, or the machines that do most of it don't actually work for us, they don't work we can't operate them, basically. Yes, there's older machines, but you gotta you melt those down, and they just don't work. You can't fix them, and there's only so many mechanics that can fix it. You yourself, I can do a little fixing of vehicles, but like vehicles are like 20 years old. I can't fix a modern vehicle. Same with modern tractors. It's a whole conversation going about that. So what gets to the point when we're making things that actually we're not able to operate or integrate well enough so we can operate it at scale efficiently, and then farmers will just kind of revert. Bigger farms will get this way. These are daunting questions that, when you actually think of the logical steps of how this could go, yeah, it's not looking great. Then again, it could. It'd give us more time to think and to be with family and be more, ourselves, instead of fighting could we create ourselves that way? And we kind of live in a connection with that. And then sooner or later, we almost like, you kind of merge the two together. There's people already trying to do that, merge sensors in our brain and AI so we can kind of merge as kind of one body. And Elon Musk is doing it. So, and who knows what the government's done, especially other ones. That gets weirder. And then, if you don't need as much population to basically just stay alive forever, well, then you don't need to procreate. You just live forever. And this is what was kind of getting brought up. I think I saw another thing on this. If you look in like Star Trek lore, the societies in some places are actually in like a world setting, an Earth-like setting, are small. There's only sometimes millions, hundreds of thousands of people on this entire planet in Star Trek. Well, part of it is because they can live forever, basically. So they just created this society that's big enough, and they're like half something. They evolved, and maybe it started as a mechanical, biological mix, but then the mix of it turned into like this other thing. So they go beyond just the physical realm. I know I'm getting deep as shit. Sorry. It's been a fun voyage thinking of it, and it's not stopping. So I'm imploring you to think about it, but think of how that's working in ag with all these things coming up. Are we building our own inevitable doom, or are we building our own inevitable shift from how we even think of how we grow things and why we grow things for energy and for production of this and that? Like, it's a kind of a zero-sum game of creating even some of these things. It's like, maybe we should just stop all of it right now and say, nope, we're just going to farm like we are right now, or go back even 20 years or 30 years or 100 years. We're just going to farm like that forever. And so that other crap never happens. Well, maybe we do in our region or our area. There's sex stuff humans that do that. The Amish, they grow their own stuff for themselves. But that's not stopping how, except China or South America, or someone down there or wherever is doing it. So it only takes one group of people to do it, and then the rest will just kind of trickle down, unless we fight it off, or I don't know. Like I said, getting really deep for my last kind of main personal podcast, and maybe I'll revive it in some different way with some co-hosts or something. But I think I've fucked your brain enough here with all of this. Started off really cool and like, hey, robots, AI, automation, Nathan. And that's like, oh shit, what is wrong with him? Oh my gosh, what is wrong with the world? Crap, we're doomed, blah, blah, blah. Just think through it. Think about the possibilities. Helps you think about your purpose in this whole thing. Like I said, it's reshifting kind of my ideology a little bit, honestly. And then I think about this, like, I'm recording my personal thoughts and ideas, and I've done that, and I want to bring in others to talk about how their stuff works and how agriculture works and all these nuanced things. Well, we're just teaching the thing to take over us, inevitably. If we just stopped doing this and started just living outside and doing our thing, honestly, it's probably the safer bet. But then, you got to live, you got to survive. There's all these other systems in place you can't ignore. How do you live within that realm? And does it even matter, because someone else is doing what you're going to do? Talk about the same stuff. I'm not the only person on the internet talking about AgTech. I guess it's kind of like, enjoy it while it lasts. Love your kids, love your family, do your job, be happy, have fun, travel the world. If it comes to that, it won't matter. That's the point of that podcast. It's like, the safety things would just delay it. Maybe another 50 years, or another 10 years, another 15 years. It's inevitable that it will reach it, because we're creating something that can learn from itself and build itself. Even if it's only digital now, we're helping it with robotics and automation on how to figure out the rest. Whether by our own want and greed and power and, making money and selling these things and all that fun stuff, to just our want to make things easier for ourselves. It's a very philosophical conundrum. And these are the things that I want to get more into, to some level of respect, with crazy thoughts of impending doom to the agriculture world. And so that's my goal. This is why it's kind of shifting things. I'm still like to do my little fun things, and I'll have that. You'll still hear from just me, trust me. But I want to take some of these thought processes and challenge them with other people in the industry, while also showcasing what their tech is and can do, and then kind of mixing the conversation in to show a different side of what people are creating in this industry. Not just here's this thing, we're helping these people do this, blah, blah, blah. Like, get into the philosophical reasons of why we're creating these things and what purpose, what reason, and how people are using it, and diving in a little deeper. And yeah, I'm going to try to make some money too on some sponsored things and advertising things. So another little add-on clip there. Plus, I got another cool thing I'm trying to put together. It'll be cool. You'll like it. And it will feed into everything. Kind of getting into a little more media-ish myself, because I got a brand. People like to listen. I'd say stupid, crazy stuff. You seem to like that. Even swear once in a while. Hence the uncensored. Like I said, this one's a little long. Maybe I'll break it into 2 parts. I'm not sure. But putting that out there, I'm positive on the direction. I'm worried about the direction in all landscapes of things. So, but I want to bring it up because I want everyone else to think and to watch these things and be aware of them, because that was also the point of that podcast. Like, he was like, what's his purpose? Like, well, to tell people. So this is me telling people in this realm about how we can start thinking of these things. So we can choose to bring it all together and put it out there in a bad way, or you come together, put it all together, and create it for a beneficial way for both, because that's the longer term solution there, the last one. But if you don't think about it, you don't conceptualize it, you don't bring up your own theories, your mind, get into it, get deep into it, you're not going to get there. If you're just going to be a slave to your own humanity, well, just become slaves to something else that we created. There's a good ending note. Shit. Well, I've gone far enough. Really curious on your thoughts. Please put them down. So there's liking. I want people to interact and talk. So for now, that is we'll call it the last of my personal series of podcasts. I think it's number 23. I'm going to refresh some stuff. So look for that. But thanks for listening. There's more. Let's get a little deeper. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.